Virginia beauty and her kin. There's nothing like the beauty of a southern belle. I ought to know, I married one, a Florida blonde. And when it comes to apples, there's nothing like the taste of a Virginia beauty. Again, I ought to know, my wife and I run a mail-order nursery specializing in antique apple trees, old southern apples in particular, and Virginia beauty is one of the best. Sink your teeth into this black-skinned pome, and you'll never be the same. Firm, yellow flesh, juicy and sweet, and the flavor keeps you guessing. Last December it was hints of cherry and almond, the year before cinnamon and vanilla. Unique is probably the best way to describe it, and it's hard to eat just one. Try an Oregon Delicious after sampling a Virginia Beauty, and you'll think you're eating sawdust. And that's not all. Virginia Beauty has some attractive cousins as well. In fact, there's a whole world of southern apples just waiting to be enjoyed. Little-known varieties with unusual names like Rambo, York, Albemarle Pippin, Spitzenberg, Yates, Mountain Boomer, Mammoth Black Twig, Hog Sweet, Rawls Genet, Horse Apple, and Buckingham. What follows is the story of a marriage divided into 3 parts. The marriage is my own. The parts are not entirely of my choosing, though they fairly represent, I think, the 3 marriages back of every union of a man and a woman. The marriage ideal, the marriage of wills, and the marriage in reality. Part 1, the story as it was half written, corresponds to the marriage ideal and is actually the first half of a book I started several years ago for my children about how my wife and I met and married. This part of the garden enclosed stands pretty much as it was written for the children and is essentially the story of a summer romance. Part 2, a dash through the years in between, tells how the romance of Part 1 became a marriage of wills 10 years later. My intention for the text at this point originally was to outline for my children some of the getting along lessons that my wife and I had learned over 20 years of married life. This plan was altered considerably, however, when my wife took up residence across town not long after our 20th anniversary. The reasons for her remove I will not go into here, except to say that she deemed the move a necessity. I am trying to decide the next step for me. The events that followed the remove are likewise tedious to relate and best left to the ears of trusted friends. Part 3, the anatomy of an argument, is a miscellany of quotes and meditations on love and marriage. It takes the place of a continuing marital narrative and represents closely the real marriage that results when 2 wills are set at cross purposes. The title here is not meant to imply that my wife and I argued continually over the years that we were together and raising 9 children. Rather, that the pilgrimage of marriage runs inevitably through the slough of disillusionment, and that it is the steps one takes in the midst of this slough that will determine in the end whether a marriage succeeds or fails. That the thoughts in this section will be regarded by some as arrogant, I do not doubt. Such is the way of conflict, and of in-laws and outlaws, glad to be shut of you. But on the plus side of the ledger, if such may be ascribed to marital division, were it not for my good wife's departure, the text of Rachael Field might never have come to be. For where I once envisioned writing several books of proper essays from the material assembled here, the demands of single parenthood have rendered this plan, it has seemed to me, untenable. which thwarting of my purpose led eventually to the notion that the writing I have done by fits and snatches over the years could be assembled as a commonplace book and published sooner rather than sometime after my 90th birthday. Thus, by one woman's rejection of my husbandry in the garden enclosed, a book of husbandry has been foisted on the public. To echo the manly phrasing of Mr. Whitman's Leaves of Grass, the aroma of these pages is an irony fair. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. Ecclesiastes 3:1 and 5. In the collected works of Lincoln, which is 9 volumes, there are over 125 texts which the editors in the 1950s labeled fragments. All of these are separated from each other, but they almost form an intellectual diary. Lincoln would take these little scraps of paper, sometimes the back of a flap of an envelope, and he would start with a problem. He would brood about it and reflect on it and sometimes do a syllogism. Some of these fragments are very self-revealing, words that Lincoln would never say out loud. Often these ideas become the basis of some later address or public letter. Lincoln was not a spontaneous genius who could sit down and with the stroke of a pen write out the Gettysburg Address or the Second Inaugural. Rather, he was a person who was taking notes through the years, and when he was ready, these notes became the grist or the foundation for a more public, polished document. Ronald White, Jr., author of A. Lincoln. I give these head quotes because they are suggestive of the content and arrangement of this part of the cultivation of Rachael field. These are the pieces of writing that I've done by fits and snatches through the years, the little pieces. I've categorized them. Each category is headed by a stone quote. There's the stone that was rolled away, the 5 smooth stones, the stone of stumbling, the philosopher's stone, even stone soup, and proverbs such as an ass does not stumble twice over the same stone. There are categories such as economy, my back to the engine, comments about history and from history, apologia, giving an answer for the hope that I have as a Christian, goodness and severity, meditations on the mystery of God's character, man born of woman, about the trouble that we all have, if I be lifted up, about the Lord Jesus. Within each category, the entries are numbered and for the most part untitled. There are stories and quotes and syllogism that make up a kind of intellectual diary. They are the stones that I have gathered from the field of my own thoughts, for there is a time for gathering stones. Anyone who sets out to write for publication will soon discover the plethora of instructional materials available to writers. There are, in fact, so many helps on the market, books, magazines, online courses, MFA programs, even shirts and mugs for writers, that it would be easy to cast the people behind these aids or this stuff as professional wannabes, those who can write, those who can't teach English. My own experience counsels otherwise. If space allowed, I could tell of books and articles that have given my writing or my understanding of the publishing process a much-needed lift. Often this help has come in the form of a quote that encapsulates what I have been learning by trial and error but have never put into words. Over the years, I have collected these quotes in file folders, on scraps of paper, in books and magazines marked with sticky notes. They are the bits of writing wisdom I return to time and again. I bring them together here for the edification of budding scribes. They that forsake the law praise the wicked, but such as keep the law contend with them. Proverbs 28:4. And that is what this section of the Cultivation of Rachael field is about, contending for truth, goading the ox. Isaiah says, the ox knoweth his owner, and the ass his master's crib, but Israel doth not know, my people doth not consider. And later he says, come, let us reason together. And so here are some of my attempts through the years at reasoning together with other folks. Letters to the editor, comments to blogs, essays and shorter pieces, all polemical, all contending. It is the sort of writing that opens you to the criticism of being a contrarian, a misanthrope, a misogynist. But I hold that contending is necessary in this world, and it's part of getting straightened out. When Paul was on the road to Damascus, he was knocked to the ground, and the voice from heaven said, Paul, it is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. It is the image of the husbandman goading the ox. The next section of the Cultivation of Rachael field is Mr. Guido's Farm Time Book. It is an essay, and a true essay, or an attempt, because I didn't know exactly where I was headed when I started writing the piece, but I think I landed right where I needed to. I pick up the story of the preceding video and tell how eventually I connected the dots and figured out whose time book this was, and where the farm was located that Mr. Kegley writes about up in Wytheville, Virginia. I think the piece should be read in its entirety. It has a meandering quality, so rather than give an excerpt of it here, I'll show you a part of a video that we shot with Mr. Rab Eder, who was, I think, 92 at the time. He had worked on the Kegley farm back in the 1930s with his cousin, Glenn Irving, who was one of Mr. Guido's tenant farmers.
Keep on going, you don't turn to your right. Now that'll take you up through what they call Town on into Cripple Creek.
I see. I saw that Cripple Creek on the map. That ain't the same Cripple Creek that they had a country song about, was it? Going up Cripple Creek?
Yeah.
Is that the same one?
Yeah. Let's stop right here.
Okay.
Now, that big field we're talking about,
Yeah.
it goes right through, you go across this hill there,
Yes.
and you'll hit it, and it joins the Krieger place here, and then it'll join the Walt Grub place.
I see.
And I don't know, I'd say it's about 2, 4, 5, about 6 acres.
Big field in there.
Through there. And
Right.
God knows how long it is. Well,
Right.
From here, anyway, it'll start right there. Now keep going on out here.
Now we're on Bria, right? Bria, and fellas, this is...
Now right over in here,
Yes.
you can't see it now. Right over in there is where Glenn Irvin's daddy, where he was raised.
I see.
Right over there. Now come right on down.
Okay.
This is, and this from my granddaddy Irvin's in here too.
Right here. I see. Okay. So would this have been his meadow then? Is that what that?
Right here is the meadow he's talking about. Right here.
Ah.
Right here.
Okay.
Now there's a little house before Glenn lived.
This one right here.
Right here.
Oh, I had it backwards, and I thought it must have been out on the other end.
Now, if you can't see it for the tree. Now he joins that, and now there's a fence that goes on up through here. That belonged to the George Krieger place.
Yes.
And it runs on back through the what they call the Rachael field, on back through there and joins Wolford's.
Yes, yes.
So now come on down.
Yes.
I see right there's the old house you're talking about.
This one here?
Yeah.
That's the one that Glenn built.
No, here's the one Glenn built.
Glenn built that one?
Yeah. And this is one that what's that name?
the tenant house? Was that?
Yeah, a tenant house.
That was the one for the farmer to stay in?
Yeah.
My goodness, look at that.
And that does all this here. Now right here, now this road takes you, now that back in there, that long field back in there.
Right.
It's got, I don't know how many houses back in there on it now.
There's 2 or 3, I believe. I've seen them from a map.
Yeah, it's back in there now.
Yeah.
That's part of it. And
They've sold that off now. It doesn't belong to these people.
yeah, now this is a whaling place. He owns this.
Yes.
And all these hills back here is his.
Yes.
And
This is the Kegley house here, fellas.
yeah, right here at the key. I said, now there's the cellar.
There's the dairy. I see.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh man, that looks like that would have. And it says there that one of the Irving.
My God, that's one of the prettiest places up through here.
That's what I've heard folks say.
Yeah.
It was highly regarded. Yeah. And it was. They said that one of the Irvin boys. Let's see, Edgar Irvin helped to build that
Yeah,
house.
well, that's Edgar Irvin was living.
Field.
Yeah, yeah. Now he put corn out there, and the long field there was mostly his farmland where he put corn and stuff.
I see.
And them,
Across the road.
Yeah, them steep hills there had corn on them.
Yes. And I guess everything was with a horse, right? No,
Yeah.
Didn't have any tractor yet.
No, the old horse.
Did you plow behind horses yourself?
Yeah.
Yep.
Lord, yet you'd plow corn a day's time. Nighttime come, you'd ready to sit down.
Ready to sit down, huh? My mom says that her brother used to go out and work with the mule, and he was a teenager, and they would stop for lunch, and they said that my Uncle Jim, he'd come in and eat more corn on the cob than the mule would.
Oh, yeah. I don't doubt that a bit. Now, if you want to, anything else you want to look about the Kegley place?
I think that kind of gets us what we need there.
We'll cut through left sure and go.
Okay. Part 7 of the Cultivation of Rachael field is entitled Gardeners Together. It is a selection of poems, and I'll read 3 as a sampler. Requiem of Leaves. The chess oak's leaf has fallen yellow now. It beckons as we hike the autumn woods. The red oak, too, has taken its final bow. Its sanguine leaf provokes a solemn mood. I see the mittened sassafras now polled, and so my hands must be if they be true. The embers of the maple leaf grow cold. I will it not, but thus my love for you. How hard to think so much has come to naught, but God himself cannot unbend ill will. I sorrow more, poor remonstrance has brought fresh heaps of scorn, my emptiness to fill. My soul is pricked and spent, it lives no more, like fallen leaves upon the forest floor. Leaves of Requiem. I should have known my dirge of autumn leaves would prove me wrong, as I have often been, for love does not forego the need to grieve when deepest flaw unwitting cuts again. And do not bleeding leaves show beauty still, as he who bled his life in love for me? And though my hand be held against its will, 'tis another hand that sets the captive free. And how could I forget the gift of you, when long ago we mourned what could not be, and knew what cannot be quenched if it be true, and so in time he brought you back to me. But now I blush, for a keeper of the trees should know of all that leaves resurrect in spring. Sabbath Day. It is a Sabbath day, the middle of the winter, 19 degrees Fahrenheit, but sunny and bright. A good day to stay warm by the oil furnace and look out at the garden and think and plan. Last year's plot is covered in compost now, crumbly and black, stark against the knowledge that it supplied us last summer with peppers and beans and squash. The humus must be tilled in soon, if next year's crop is to be better than last. How odd this appropriation of death can seem. How strange that the soil is richly replenished by sticks and leaves and grass. But it is the only way to a better harvest, and as a kind of Sabbath parable, the only way to an abundant life. The last part of the cultivation of Rachael Field is actually two appendices. The first one is titled Going to West Virginia, and it is an excerpt from Mr. Guido's journal, a 3-month excerpt from the time when Mr. Dave Sexton worked there, and at the end of his tenure, Mr. Guido writes, says he's settled up, and he says that Dave Sexton is going to West Virginia. The second appendix is titled Grand Recriminations, and it is a sampler, or it is some excerpts from my journal, personal journal. I've always been drawn to such documents myself because you can find in them the fellowship of suffering and sometimes the tincture of humor. And I could read the piece, but I think it would actually make me tired to read that thing. I trust that it won't make you tired. And instead of doing that, would give instead a pastiche of song and pictures, just that tell about our life here on the urban homestead. And it's not much of a song. It was I was playing around with the kids one day. But listen, you'll hear Aubrey over in there, and hope you'll enjoy it.
Here we go. Saturday morning we went to pick some beans. Eli and Aidan and Aubrey Catherine. Well, straight off Aubrey cut her finger on a piece of grass. Said I need to go back for a Band-Aid over at the house, and I said no. Whoa, we gotta pick these beans. I said no, 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 no. Yeah, we gotta pick these beans. So Aubrey started picking them beans just like a man. Filled up to the brim a big old kitchen pan. Eli and Aidan, they worked like little men, picking our beans for supper. Now we've got them simmering. Oh yeah, they're mean bean pickers. Mean bean pickers. Well, they're mean bean pickers. Whoa. Mean bean pickers. Long pod beans, pink tip beans, half runner beans, 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 beans. Well, they're mean bean pickers. Whoa, mean bean pickers. Yeah, Aubrey.
What are you doing?
Well, we're singing about you picking these beans, 'cause you're a mean bean picker. Okay.